A very good morning to all of you. In this lecture, I shall be dealing with an essay by Matthew Arnold, the famous Victorian critic. The title of the essay is The Study of Poetry. Here, he talks about the role of poetry in human society and in culture. His opinion is a bit contrary to uh, Plato. I hope you remember that Plato was against poets and against poetry because he was of the opinion that poetry and poets spoiled society. So all poets should be discarded from an ideal society. That was Plato's opinion. However, Aristotle was, not in on the side of this particular opinion. He opposed Plato's opinion. So, contrary to the Platonic prediction, Platonic means related to Plato. Plato thought that poetry is bad and it is not good for society. Arnold's belief is contrary to this particular prediction. He had predicted. Prediction means to tell something about future. Arnold believes that poetry has significant use in the process of knowledge, especially knowledge creation, I mean to say. Poetry has significant use in the process of knowledge creation. Means, according to Arnold, poetry creates knowledge. And at the same time, it has an important role. Poetry should be understood as a wider term to refer to literature here. Since the beginning itself, I've been telling you that poetry stands for literature, not poetry as a genre. So poetry means literature has a very crucial role in the process of knowledge creation and progression of human beings. If at all human society wishes to make some progress, advancement, then time poetry has its important role. That's what Arnold believed. So any kind of poetry as an artistic endeavor provides reflection and commentary. Now, what is artistic endeavor? Means an artistic effort. Endeavor means effort, attempt. So any poetry is an artistic effort, and as an artistic effort, poetry provides reflection. Reflection means a deep thinking. Okay, here reflection should not be taken as an image, the reflection of image. Here, reflection should be taken as deep thinking. So, poetry provides reflection. At the same time, we can also understand as a reflection of human society and commentary on the finer aspects of survival and struggles. So, poetry makes us think deeply about our finer aspects. Finer aspects means the good side of human life, human existence, and human struggles. So there is a kind of commentary on it. There is a kind of deep thinking on it in poetry. So reflection is an ambiguous term here. It can be a reflection means the mirror, held to the society. At the same time, it can be the deep contemplation over the finer aspects of survival and struggles. And poetry or literature is elemental to the investigations in theology and science. So it is an element, an important element in the investigations in theology. Theology means the science of religion, Dharma Shastra, and science itself. If at all you want to understand theology, if at all you want to understand science, you cannot escape from poetry or literature, it is an essential element. So one of the important elements in understanding theology and science should be poetry, and that helps in understanding it. In the investigation means the systematic study. Okay, if at all you want to study theology and science systematically, poetry can provide you a base for it. That's what Arnold believed. Further, he claims that the need for poetry and its faculties will help human beings harness purpose and tranquility in the times and generations to come. So, it is Arnold's claim that the need for poetry or literature, poetic sensibility, okay. So, all these are poetic faculties. Yes, you have the ability to write poem. You have the imagination power. At the same time, you have poetic sensibility. So all these faculties will help human beings to harness. Harness means to control purpose, purpose and tranquility in the times and generation to come. In the future generation, it will guide people to have some purpose. At the same time, it can help you to enjoy tranquility. Tranquility means the state of being alone. So, in William Wordsworth's definition of poetry, we come across the term tranquility, the word tranquility. He defines poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So, tranquility is the state of meditation, the state of being alone. And poetry can help in all these spheres of human life. So Arnold believes that the central thought of the poem matters more than any other concept in the poem. So for him, the content is important, the message is important, the central thought is important, not the form. So any other aspect, means he gives priority to central thought, to the theme of poetry. So what he says that the central thought of the poem matters more than any other concepts in the poem, so much so that it becomes the central fact of the poem. So the central idea, the central thought in the poem is equal to the central fact. So that is important. It is relevant. It is important, more important than any other concept in that poem. So this particular idea of Arnold links to the emotions of the reader. And what he thinks, the central thought helps the readers to give expression to their feelings as well. So this is related, linked to the emotions of the reader. And poetry provides an expression to these emotions. When you read a poem, when you read a literature, I'm sorry, when you read literature, then time you start thinking about your own emotions. So it is a kind of a vent to your emotions. A vent means an outlet. Your emotions are also expressed in the form of poetry. Then he goes on talking about the ways of reading poetry. So the title of the essay is The Study of Poetry. So he goes on talking about the methods, the mechanisms of analyzing poetry. So he highlights different mechanisms by which people analyze and censor various works of poetry and poets. Now here, by people he means critics. Critics can analyze and even censor. Censor means you might be knowing. You come across the term censor in the context of cinema, films, we can say. Censor means a kind of control. So to bring control, means certain part is deleted, not allowed to be shown on the screen, etc. So that is censorship. National censorship authority is there in every country. So people analyze and censor various works of poetry and poets by using different mechanisms. And he uh, underscores, he illustrates three distinct methods of the same, means for analyzing poetry, for censoring different aspects of poetry. And these three estimates include real estimate, historical estimate, and personal estimate. Okay, we shall be deep talking about these three estimates in detail. So real estimate refers to unbiased and unprejudiced evaluation with a fine balance between historical context and innovation and the flair of the individual poet. Now, what does it mean? Real estimate stands for the unbiased, without any kind of bias in your mind, without any kind of prejudice in your mind. Now, prejudice means assumptions. In Marathi, we call it purva graha, dusit bhavana, which are, so that should not be there. So your evaluation, analysis of the poem should be unbiased. You should not take sides. It should be a fine balance, no, between what historical context and innovation. Means you should take help of history, historical context. At the same time, you should come up with some kind of innovation, new idea, and you should have again the flair of the individual poet. So three aspects are to be considered in this particular estimate. Estimate, I hope you know the term estimate. Uh, we talk about estimate in terms of money, no? Bring estimate. If you want to order, place some order. So generally, the you know organizations ask for the estimate, or if you want to buy something, you ask for the estimate from the seller. So that is predicted amount, okay, for to be spent on that particular item. So here, real estimates means what? The plan. You can apply that particular plan over here. Means you can take historical context into consideration. You can talk about the newness in the poetry, and you can talk about the usefulness of the poem to the individual. Or at the same time, you can consider the individual poet's abilities as well. Then he talks about the historical estimate. So in this particular estimate, here we can understand estimate as a kind of what we call the measuring criterion. Mapadanda म्हणतो आपण, मापदंड. So historical estimate here can be refers to historical background. So the value judgment with innovation and creativity has been given less importance over here than the historical context of the poem. Yes, here the historical background of the poem becomes important, not the value judgment. Now, value judgment means whether it is good or bad. You judge it in terms of goodness or badness. So that value judgment is not important in this particular estimate. At the same time, innovation and creativity also become a bit uh, insignificant in this context in comparison to historical context, we can say. Then he talks about personal estimate. So this is now rife with personal and cognitive biases. Personal, of course, means full of personal and cognitive biases. Bias means you might be knowing an approach wherein you have something in your mind and you start looking from that perspective. We say we put on a specs of different colors and we start looking at the things. You look at it from what you call religious perspective, from what we call this caste perspective, this and that perspective. So these are biases, cognitive biases means related to your mind, whatever comes to your mind. So these are the personal and cognitive biases of the individual reader, and dependent on their preference and tastes. Means individual choices, individual tastes, individual likes and dislikes are brought into the analysis of the poetry. So this is how poetry is read by using these three estimates. We shall talk about these things in detail.